Salutations, my esteemed students of siege warfare. Today's topic lies in the year 332 BC, with Alexander the not yet great wanting to do what his father could not and defeat the Persian Empire. Deep into his campaign on the Phoenician coast, Alexander arrives at the island stronghold of Tyre. Being the Phoenicians' last harbor city in the area, he marked it as a must-have objective. Our guy Alex, he's an understanding guy. He tried negotiating for peace, not once, but twice. And the result of the second try ended up with his envoys being killed and thrown into the sea like yesterday's Euro. Enraged, Alex commenced the siege. At this point in his life, he wasn't known as Alexander the Great. He was known as Alexander the Boatless because he had no navy. Now remember, Tyre was an island city. This wasn't going to stop Alexander. No, this would barely even slow him down. Immediately, as the siege began, Alex ordered his troops to build a causeway into the sea. Laughing at Poseidon's boundary, this causeway would extend more than a quarter of a mile straight towards the island city. Alex was literally bending the earth to his will. Let me repeat that. They were building a land bridge from the mainland to the island city. Alex thought, if the land doesn't reach the city, I will make more land. Sadly though, the sea eventually became too deep to build the causeway any further. So naturally, Alex continued to just break the rules, and he had his troops build the largest siege towers to ever exist at this point. He took these siege towers and rolled them to the end of the causeway. These wooden monstrosities were laden with catapults and ballista. The height of the towers gave his weapons the range needed to rain hell on Tyre's walls. Now, there are two sides to this battle, and not to be overshadowed by Alexander, the Tyrians looked to Bugs Bunny for some inspiration. The Tyrians came up with a stupid solution to the siege weapons. They made large pillows from seaweed, and they affixed them to the walls of the city. These would suffice to cushion the blows from the rocks being thrown from the siege towers. This would save the city walls for a time. In addition, the Tyrians would use their surplus of boats to their advantage. They took an old horse transport ship, filled it up with pitch and tar, added a ton of weight to the stern of the boat, allowing the bow of the ship to be lifted out of the water. It was literally a floating, sailing gate to hell. In an extreme act of dexterity, the Tyrians would Ryan Gosling the ship and drive it straight into Alexander's siege towers, burning these beautiful siege towers to the ground. Very sad. At this point, seeing his towers fall, Alex thought, maybe I do need a navy. And this is the part of the story that really pisses me off. Apparently, Alex had a navy, just sitting around, ready to be used. From his previous sieges, he had taken about 80 boats into his cause. In addition to these boats, the king of Cyprus would send an additional 120 ships to help him out in his siege. So either he just forgot about his navy, or he didn't want to use it. Maybe Alex just wanted bragging rights by taking an island city without a navy. He was willing to have his troops fight out in the sea on a narrow causeway against formidable walls and artillery, just at a chance to increase his reputation. I guess you don't get to be called the Great without making a few stupid decisions. Either way, he went from Alexander the Boatless to Alexander, I suddenly have the best navy in the area. Once Alex's navy showed up to the siege and was up and running, they hit their first roadblock. Quite literally a block. The Tyrians had thought of everything, and they lowered giant rocks in the sea around their city. This prevented Alex's boats from getting up to the walls and hitting them with their rams. This was just another minor slowdown for Alex though. Old foreman Alex had his troops build cranes on the ships, and they picked up those rocks and just moved them out of the way. So with that done, and rams mounted onto the ships, he sailed up to the walls and began pounding away. In a pathetic, last-ditch effort, the Tyrians began stalking our boy Alexander. These stalkers took note that Alex went on his union-mandated lunch break and took his midday nap at the same time every day. At the same time as Alexander's nap, most of his navy would also dock and take a little rest. On the day the Tyrians launched their desperate surprise attack, they were able to slaughter many a Macedonian seaman. But of course, naturally, Alexander skipped his lunch break that day. This meant he was able to quickly rouse his ships and get behind the surprise attackers, sinking many Tyrian ships and turning the tides of the battle. After their failed plot, the Tyrians had nothing left, and it was merely a matter of time before Alex's siege weapons were able to puncture the walls. Eventually, the rams breached the walls and Alexander's troops took the city. On the day of the breach, Alexander himself was atop a siege tower, raining hellfire onto the Tyrian defenders. That is the coolest thing. It doesn't get much cooler than that. And to summarize just how cool this siege was, here are my favorite points of interest. The first being the causeway we discussed. Tyre was turned into a peninsula, no longer an island, and it remains a peninsula to this day. This is potentially the first time in history that siege weapons were used to destroy the walls of the city and not just attack the defenders atop the walls. The part where the Tyrians sailed that meteor straight into Alex's siege towers, that is amazing. Using a naval-based weapon to destroy a land-based weapon, that's based. Upon running into a roadblock with the giant stones preventing his rams from getting up to the walls, Alexander just put cranes on ships and moved them out of the way like it was just another day on the job site. On the day of the surprise attack, of course Alexander skipped his midday nap. You gotta be lucky to be the Great. Another cool point is Alexander the Great firing siege weapons himself from atop a siege tower. That's the kind of general I want, leading the siege head on. It took Alexander only 7 months to take this island stronghold. The last guy who seriously tried to siege Tyre took 13 years, and he never succeeded. The last thing, the causeway that Alexander built turned Tyre into a peninsula, and there is a Starbucks on that causeway today. And as always, thank you for watching. Here at the Siege Captain, Professor Siege Captain is an eternal student himself. If I misconstrued any facts, please let me know down below. Also, if there's any interesting points that I missed, let me know down below as well. I love learning about sieges. I wanted to cover the Siege of Tyre so badly because it shows up in every siege-related topic I research. And with that, I hope you learned a thing or two today, or you were at least entertained. I hope I earned your subscription today. I also hope to see you again soon. Go forth and siege the day.
Cool.
It's a wrap.